Good evening. I'm Hope Preston, and welcome to the April meeting of the Washington County Master Gardeners. Our presentation tonight, as you can see, is on Oregon Odonata, the dragonflies and damselflies around us, presented by Erin Forrester. Erin is a certified Oregon naturalist and a citizen odontologist and member of the Dragonfly Society of the Americas. She and her husband travel around the state photographing every species that they can find. And Erin, I assume you have one of those giant lenses on a giant camera to do this.
We do.
And hopefully we will see a picture of said camera.
Maybe. It might be in one of them. We'll see.
So as you, if you have questions as Erin goes through her presentation, please put them in the Q&A. And at the end of the presentation, I will sort through them and present them to Erin, and then she can answer all of your questions. So without further ado, Erin, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Hope. Thank you, Master Gardener friends, for inviting me to join you today. I'll just move along my presentation. So before we get started, I just wanted to say that this is an introduction. There's a lot deeper we could go, but this is an introduction to Oregon Odonata to the best of my ability as a citizen odontologist. I am not a certified doctorate in entomology. I am a hobbyist, and so I'll do my best to kind of take you through Odonata over the next hour. Also, every photo in this presentation was taken by myself or my husband in our adventures looking for dragons all over the state of Oregon. So I hope you are astounded with some of the portraits that we'll show you tonight. And I will say too that there's probably 24 species represented throughout here. And rather than there being a section of the presentation later that's these are the dragons species of Oregon, you'll find these photos throughout the presentation tonight. So I will try to speak to each one of the species during the content instead of having a designated section just for that. And this handsome gentleman here is a striped meadowhawk. Just love how he shined up for me. Okay, a little bit more about myself. Hope gave a nice little introduction, but as she mentioned, I'm a certified Oregon naturalist. My field work was here in the Willamette Valley ecoregion, and she's also where I live, so it's easy to be a naturalist where you live. My own habitat and garden is a certified backyard habitat with an Odonata nursery because we do have a pond and we're able to see the full life cycle of these animals in our own backyard. I am a Oregon, I'm a site certifier actually for the Backyard Habitat Certification Program. So I do participate in that, and I know a lot about our native plants, gardening for wildlife, and how to bring these animals to your own backyard. I am a board member for not only for both the Friends of Willamette Valley National Wildlife Refuge Complex. It's a mouthful. That looks after Ankeny, Finley, and Basket Slough refuges in the Willamette Valley. I'm also a board member for the Tualatin River National Wildlife Refuge, which is here much closer to home. And as Hope mentioned, I am a member of the Dragonfly Society of the Americas and a citizen odontologist. So I've spent probably 5 or 6 years now throwing myself at dragonflies and all that I can learn. And that's a picture of my own habitat here in Portland and a picture of my husband and I. So the topics we're going to cover tonight, you may have seen it in the flyer for this event, but we'll talk a little bit about the brief history and taxonomy of dragonflies, the life cycle, habitat, and diet of these animals, some Oregon species with all the portrait photography, their amazing attributes, how to find dragons, some resources, how to invite them to your own garden. And some goals I have for this session are that you feel more informed and aware of the odonates around you, but that also that you're inspired to go find these animals in the field and study them for yourself. And this is perfect timing, early April, because the first dragons are going to start to emerge here in the next few weeks. So I hope you're getting excited and ready for them when you start to see them flying around. And I don't know if I never mind. There's so much to cover. Okay, dragons. So when I look at a dragonfly, I don't just see an insect. I see beauty, I see power, I see joy. I just love these animals. This is an 8-spotted skimmer, one of the more common dragons that you might see in our area. And we'll start from the beginning as so dragonflies have been around for 330 million years. They were one of the first winged insects to evolve. They came so they were 100 million years before the dinosaurs even came to be. They've watched the dinosaurs come and go. They watched our continents form Pangea and move back out. They have seen a lot. And as you can imagine, hundreds of millions of years has made them a very efficient animal. While our dragonflies today, the max dragonfly is really only like 5 or 6 inches long, there are fossilized dragonflies at about 2.5 feet. There are a lot of theories as to why. The atmosphere was different, the diets were different of those animals, but just to give you an idea, like a 2.5 foot dragonfly is about the size of a golden retriever. That's a very big animal. Um, and I'll say, I know I've said the word odonata a lot, and you probably don't. Let me just say a little bit about what that is. So, odonata came from the Greek word odonatos, which means toothed one in Greek. And that's because these animals were first thought to have teeth. But actually, we now know they have mandibles that they use to munch on their prey. They actually don't have teeth. And despite being called dragonflies, these animals are not dragons, nor are they flies. But if you remember your high school biology, I threw up the taxonomic hierarchy up here so you could see kingdoms all the way down to species and where Odonata lives in that scheme. So Odonata is the order of insects that comprises 2 suborders, Anisoptera, which is dragonflies, and Zygoptera, which is damselflies. So those together make up the order of Odonata. So when I mention Oregon Odonata, it's both dragons and damsels in the state. There are 6,200 species of Odonata on the planet. And that may sound like a lot, but Coleoptera, beetles, has 350,000 species on this planet. So there isn't any reason you shouldn't be able to, check off and see all 6,200 species on the planet Earth. But yeah, this is a flame skimmer and also one of the more common dragons that you'll see in our area. They're bright red. They're kind of hard to miss. So by the numbers, I talked about the 6,200 species that are across the world. If we start to zoom in a little bit, in North America, there's about 750 species. And if we come down, that includes a lot of in South America. If we look at just the United States, there's 450 species. And then when we get down to Oregon, there's really only like 90 to 95. These animals like to live where it's more tropical and is more suited to their environment. So as you can see, we don't have as many here in Oregon as there are in other parts of the world. But it's nice that we still have quite a variety. So let's break that down a little bit more. I know it's an awful lot of the science. So Oregon Odonata, of the 20, I think there are get my notes here. There are 26 families of Odonata worldwide. Of those 26, we have 10 here in our state. And so I listed them out. You can see both dragons and damsels that you can find in the state of Oregon. I would say 25 to 30% of these are pretty common. You should be able to see them most summers going around to our various different wetlands. The yellow smileys show you which species my husband and I have seen and photographed in the state of Oregon. Only 39 or 40 species, which we're still making our way, trying to get like Pokemon, trying to collect them all, trying to find all 90 in the state. Some are hard to find. Some are very local, very localized. and specific regions, specific times of year. But there are a lot of species that you'll be able to see regularly in our own backyard. And I'll pause on this page, let you soak it in a little bit more. Okay. So so our dragonflies come in so many colors. It's astounding. They can look dichroic, like they've got like flecks and sheen. They can come in any different color. And I'll mention too, this slide only shows dragonflies. Damselflies themselves also pack a punch. They can also be extremely colorful. But I wanted to show all the wide variety that you can find when you go into the field. And one thing about dragonflies as well is sexual dimorphism. So the males and the females may be completely different colors, usually, in a species. Sometimes they're nearly identical and it's hard to distinguish, but you might find even in a particular species, you have different color variations because they're male or female. But it really is a cornucopia that you can see out there. I will point out too, nymphs, the babies are actually all gray and brown because they have to blend in with their environment to reach adulthood. So you won't find these colors in the nymphs, but you do in the adults. So a little bit more of the science, the anatomy of the dragonfly and the damselfly. So I put two images here side by side so that you can see. If you're in the field and you see something fly by you and it might perch, there's a couple of easy ways to distinguish, was it a dragon or was it a damsel? Um, Usually, and there are exceptions to every rule, but usually the dragons are significantly larger than the damselflies. They also hold their wings out when they are at rest, whereas damselflies have their wings over their back when they are at rest. Dragonflies generally have their eyes together and joined, and they kind of wrap their head like a motorcycle helmet, whereas the damselflies will have their eyes on either end, almost like a hammerhead shark. The wing pairs are different shapes on a dragon, whereas on the damsels, the wings are actually the same shape, the forewings and the hind wings. So these are some quick ways when something flies by you to see, like, what did I see, to kind of narrow it down. And they're made up of three main body segments. They have their head, which has the mandibles, the antenna, the eyes, the brain, the thorax, which is the locomotion center. So it's what? It's legs that move, the wings that move, it's the motor area. And then the abdomen, which is the long trail behind the animal that has the reproductive organs and helps with like how they orient or thermoregulation and other stuff. Here's an example of them side by side. This is not to scale. The tool bluet on the right is actually much smaller, maybe even less than half the size of this beautiful blue-eyed darner that I photographed. And as you can see, so the dragon, the eyes are connected and they almost wrap around, whereas the damsel's eyes are apart. The dragon at rest holds his wings out, the damsel over the back. And much different in size and sort of overall sense of shape. I want to talk a little bit more about the eyes and what makes these animals so special. So, oh, I just love this photo. Just shout out to my husband. He took this photo. This blue dasher photo is probably one of the favorites I have in our collection. Dragonflies have 30,000 lenses per eye. We also call them ommatidia. Ommatidia are the lenses over the eye. That they have extraordinary vision, and because their eyes wrap almost their entire head, they have almost 360-degree vision. It's impossible to sneak up on a dragonfly. Um, they just by contrast, if we think like, oh, animals that have really great eyesight, we think of flies, right? A fly only has 4,000 lenses per eye, 8,000 total, and a dragon has 30,000 per eye. 80% of its brain is dedicated to his sight. So they are looking and firing, like that's why they know exactly where to be and to move. They're all about the eyes. Here's an example. This is a female Western pond hawk. I just love it. I always, when I first started, I loved looking at dragons because I thought, oh, they always have their eye on me. They're just always looking at me, and it just felt like you had such a connection. Well, they see you, they see everything. But that black pupil in the center of the eye is actually an optical illusion. It's called a pseudopupil. It occurs because their eyes are curved, and all of those ommatidia lenses that go straight down to the center of the eye. So like wrapping the eye and going straight to the center. So the pseudopupil is an optical illusion that's based on wherever you're oriented and you're looking directly down the animal's eye, it's going to look black to you because you're looking directly down. Trust me, this dragon's looking at you and everything else. But when I remember when I first got started, before I learned that, I just felt like, oh, they're looking at me. It's just such a great, like, little connection. Here's another example of that pseudopupil effect on this cardinal meadowhawk that I took. He was so patient. I just loved it. But I definitely was looking at me more intently because he cocked his head to look up at me. But you could see that pseudopupil like looking directly down into the ommatidia. Few more examples of eyes. On the left, an American emerald. I was so excited when this gentleman landed right in front of my feet because the emeralds are extremely difficult to photograph. But he landed right in front of my feet. His eyes on this image are not color enhanced. They are that green. But huge pseudopupil effect, just able to look right. I was just positioned to look right down into those. And then the blue dasher on the right, I was really surprised in the top photo how his eyes presented themselves in the sun and actually kind of washed out the pseudopupil effect. In the macro shot on the lower right, it's so close and fine that you can now start to see all of those individual lenses wrapping the eye. Talked about the eyes. Let's talk about the wings. So, despite having 6 legs, dragonflies do not walk. They catch their prey on the wing. So, if they can't fly, they will starve. So wings are very, very important for these animals. Their wings are not flat. It's like a stained glass window. So every single segment is kind of full of peaks and valleys and at different angles so that it can really maximize the push as they fly through the air. It's how they can achieve really great speeds. They can even fly up to 30 miles an hour, which would get you pulled over in a school zone. But these guys pull it off. Their wings are extraordinary. They're individually attached, so they can move all 4 wings independently. They can fly forward, backward, up, down. They can turn on a dime. That's like, again, between that and their eyesight, you will never sneak up on, and catch a dragonfly with your bare hand. Because of their eyesight, I mentioned 80% of their brain is dedicated to their sight and their wing power. They're an extremely efficient predator. We think about some of the top predators on planet Earth today. Lions only catch their prey 25% of the time, and eagles and sharks, both of these top predators, are only about 50% of the time do they catch their prey. Dragonflies catch their prey 95% of the time. They are the world's most efficient predator, and they've had 330 million years to get it right. So let's take a few more pictures looking at the wings. This is a lady striped meadowhawk. The males are red. The females are a little bit more brown like this. Very common species for our area. Just seeing how she is holding her wings at different angles because they are independent. So she can hold and orient them at different angles, not only for like wind when flying, but angled like this for thermoregulation. So you'll find some of the dragons, they might perch up with their abdomen in the air, or they've got their wings at different orientations facing the sun. It helps them regulate their body temperature. Oh, the story with this one. So this is a blue-eyed darner. It's able to get this guy in flight with a lot of patience, and I think, as Hope mentioned, a really good lens. Here's a picture of one in flight. You can see the wings are at all different orientations. But another thing I wanted to point out about this is you can see his little feet. His legs and feet are tucked up right really close to his body. So even though they have those 6 legs, they're tucked in tight. And he's super fast to fly, but he'll snatch his legs out to grab prey and then put that right in his mandibles and munch and, get his meal in that way. But the legs aren't just hanging there dragging, like, see bees fly around, their legs are maybe getting just kind of hanging down. You won't find that with dragons. They're tucked in tight so that they are really fast flyers. To get this photo, I'll just share a little story. I was kayaking with my husband on Vernonia Lake, and after I got this photo, and I knew I had it because I checked my camera and I was so excited. But kayaking around, I saw an exuviae, which is a nymph casing on a reed that I very much wanted for my collection. And I reached too far into the reeds, tipped my kayak, camera and all, into the lake. And the only thing I could think about was, no, not that blue-eyed darner photo that I just got. I ruined it. But my husband was able to save the camera and we retrieved this photo, so all is well. But oh, that was nerve-wracking. All right, so here's some more examples of wings. I didn't actually go too into it too much, but the different families that we have in Oregon of the dragons and then the damsels. There are 3 families of damselflies that we have in the state. One is called spread wings. So it's actually the exception to, I said, damsels always hold their wings over the back. Spread wings, as their name, spread wings, is the exception to that rule. You'll see this emerald spread wing here at rest, wings out. Don't let that fool you that wings out, it must be a dragon, because if it's in this family, it could be a damselfly. But there are times like in the lower left here, where you'll see that this male did fold his wings back over the back. But generally a spread wing is true to its name, has its wings spread. So what do they eat? Um, Dragonflies will pretty much eat anything they can catch on the wing. They will eat mosquitoes, flies, butterflies, even other dragonflies. One adult dragonfly can eat up to 200 mosquitoes a day, which is another reason just to have them around. The nymphs in the water will eat anything that they can fit in their mouths, even other nymphs. In fact, if you look at this photo closely enough, you'll see that this Western pondhawk female here, what's she eating? She's eating a damselfly. It's curled up, a little meal for her. But they're part of the food chain too. Even though they're efficient predators at getting their own meals, they do fall prey to birds, spiderwebs, bullfrogs, even other dragons. The life cycle. There's a lot of words on this slide. I don't expect you to read it all, but just know that if you think about it, I know we mostly see dragonflies in the air, and we think, oh, they're a land insect. These are actually aquatic animals. They spend most of their lives in the water. Eggs are laid in the water. Within a few weeks, those eggs hatch into nymphs. Those nymphs could go through their life cycle. They molt, they eat, based on the water temperature and their diet, they could move through their cycle enough to emerge even in that same summer. But more than likely, those eggs and those nymphs will stay in the water for 1, even up to 4 years before they emerge as an adult dragonfly. So really, these animals spend most of their life in the water, and they are aquatic insects, but we get to enjoy them most when they're out completing their adulthood. When they do decide they're ready to emerge, the conditions are right, they've had enough to eat, they've molted maybe 12 times, they will find a reed or a rock or some perfect place to crawl out of the water. Their skin their exuviae splits open along the back. The dragonfly sort of unpacks and curves and telescopes out of that tight container, and then we'll spend a few hours filling into his adult shape, hardening his wings until he's ready to take flight as an adult and then find a mate and work through the process of again ovipositing eggs for the next generation. Here is a photo that my husband took on the Tualatin of a couple pairs of tool bluets. So you can see the males are still attached to the females, keeping guard and watching, while the females are ovipositing or laying their eggs directly in the water. Some species will even risk total submersion into the water to make sure they're laying their eggs in the perfect spot. But here you can see they're depositing them directly in this piece of bark that was floating. You may have seen dragonflies connected like this and want to know a little bit more about it. These top left photo, you can see where they're actually fully connected. That's called the mating wheel. And this is because the males carry their reproductive organs on their abdomen much closer to the thorax, whereas the females have their reproductive organs much lower in the thorax. Well, how else should they meet? And the animals it's probably a little clumsy. So in order to help her out, the male will connect the end of his abdomen kind of around her neck, just sort of grabbing and giving her a little bit of an assist so that she can reach her organs up to his and they can copulate that way. And so you might see even flying around connected in the mating wheel, or she might have disconnected and the male is still connected to kind of protect her and keep watch. There's the lower left is a couple of river jewel wings. The male is standing guard while the female's ovipositing. And this lovely image on the right is a female river jewel wing depositing her eggs in the Tualatin. They're just extraordinary. The river jewel wings aren't out very long, but they're a riverine species, so you will only see them if you visit a river, like the Tualatin River. But if you do get the chance to come across them, they're absolutely eye-catching. True to their name, jewel wing. So I'm going to show you a few more photos, demystifying the process of adult dragonfly coming to be. The top middle photo is a picture of a nymph that we got in our own pond. It's a skimmer nymph. And then on the right, you'll see this is an example of an exuviae of a nymph that crawled out of the water onto a reed and went through its emergence. The bottom middle photo is an emergence happening real time. So you can see that the dragon has split the skin open, the back starting to peel out. And then this image on the far left is a young teneral dragonfly, not an adult yet, but has recently emerged and his wings are still white. Their wings aren't immediately clear. They take time to harden and turn into those translucent wings that we see when we see the adults. So here is a fantastic sequence that we got. I think maybe it was last summer or the summer before last. We were on Vernonia Lake, and we were fortunate enough to be a part of a mass emergence of the spiny basket tail. I mean, hundreds of these around you going through their emergence. So we got these photos, and you can see the first one on the left, he just came out, and this is a male. He just came out of his exuviae. So his tracheal tubing is still almost attached. That's how it helps them breathe when they're still in the aquatic stage. Look at those wings. Those wings are shriveled and tiny and dark. His abdomen is still curled and fat, not long and lean, and there's not a lot of color yet on his thorax. So he just came out. That one in the middle is probably 15 minutes later. He started to fill through the abdomen has kind of lengthened a little bit. You can see there's a little more color to the thorax. The wings are still ever so translucent, but they certainly look a lot better than they did when he first came out. And then we have another photo some minutes later where he's about to take flight. His wings have hardened quite a bit. His abdomen has really filled in. And now he's starting to look more like an adult spiny basket tail. But we were just so excited to get this series. And here are some photos of some just extraordinary adults. The chalk-fronted corporal. I found a large population of these at Trillium Lake up in Mount Hood area, if you want to see those. And there's a variegated meadowhawk in the top right. That's a male. The females are more yellow. And the bottom is the four-spotted skimmer. You can see those in our area, but you'll see more of them in the Coast Range, I think, if you head out that direction. But some extraordinary colors, such power. Think about the metamorphosis these animals went through and those pictures you just saw and what they look like here. So the habitat. Habitat is where it's at, as the slide says. You can find dragons pretty much anywhere where there's water. They love lakes, ponds, rivers, but their favorite is wetlands. Wetlands. They love areas that have vegetation to land on for their young to emerge. It also, and an area like this that has lots of prey, so a lot of other flying insects for them to eat. Under the water, the habitat for nymphs, ideal would be something with a lot of leaf matter or pebbles where those animals could hide and hunt. So you'll find lots of complexity, but pretty much where there's water, you'll find dragons. Here's an example of the sexual dimorphism I talked about earlier, but this is a female and a male dot-tailed whiteface. They look very different. They look like they're two different species, but they're not. Same species. But just to say, when you are out about and you're at a habitat and you're looking for dragons, even though I mentioned they're drawn to water, don't always necessarily look at the water. So they could be hanging up on leaves that are around the trails nearby water. As we mentioned, they can fly 30 miles an hour. So it takes them a minute to be quite far of what you might think from the water, but for them, it's no time at all. So even though your trails might not be like around the water, if you're walking somewhere where there's water nearby, you could even see dragons. So kind of keep your eyes open. They might be perched on this one on the left. This female was perched on invasive blackberry. And on the right, this one, the male, I did get overhanging water, but just to say, kind of keep your eyes open. This is a Pacific clubtail, another riverine species. The only way to see these is to get on the water. So my husband and I have kayaks, and that's where we've seen and gotten actually most of our best photography has been approaching the animals from the water instead of from the shore. We're able to get a lot closer. So this Pacific clubtail was perched on a piece of driftwood in the middle of the river. There would have been no way for me to get to it other than the kayak and my nice lens. And I wanted to point out too, this is one of those exceptions, as I mentioned, between dragons and damsels, about dragons having their eyes connected. This family, the Gomphidae family, their eyes are disconnected. You can see that his two eyes are actually not joined, but don't let that fool you. This is still a dragonfly, but there's just one of those exceptions. I like these photos too because you don't always see dragonfly species side by side. And when you do get to see them side by side, you can see just how different maybe different species are in their size differentiation. So this top photo, you have a flame skipper and a blue dasher. Very common species in our area right here. And you would think looking at two independent photos that they must be the same size. Well, here you can see side by side, actually, wow, the flame skimmer is quite a bit larger than the blue dasher. So I find that interesting. The lower image of the 8-spotted skimmer and the 4-spotted skimmer, I found this one interesting because these animals usually chase the other one off. Like for two different species to be at rest near each other, they must have been very tired and just not up for the fight at that moment. All right. So if you're ready to find some dragons, as I mentioned, water. So just add water. You might get the opportunity to see some of these dragons moving through your home garden or your habitat. But if you are interested to look for more or even see new species, you got to get out and go to them. I also photograph when it comes to ID. I photograph like crazy. I've gotten to the point better where I'm better now to be able to ID many of them in the field, but that's because I've been doing this for 6 years. But if you're new and you're wanting to really work through and understand identification, just photograph them first. And if you can photograph them at different angles, it will help you later when you go back to your computer and you're looking at your photos. You can see the fine detail, and then you'll be able to work through an identification. And you gotta start somewhere. So don't stress that you're maybe not getting the perfect photos that you want. Just take what you can, and you can learn along the way. Um, I will say too that you may need to get wet. These are aquatic animals, and the best way to see them is to approach them from the water, not from the shore. So my husband and I do have kayaks, as I mentioned. If you're a bit uh, adventurous like me sometimes and I tip my kayak, you might get a little more wet. Protect that camera gear. But it is the best way to get close to a closer look at these animals, and certainly a wider variety of species. We are so fortunate that we live in Oregon. There is water and opportunity, like habitat all around us. Some of these are taken right next to my house. You can go to wetlands, refuges, any trails, rivers. If there's water nearby, chances are there will be dragons nearby. I put these in here because last year I added 5 new species to my list. I mentioned we photographed 39 of the 90 species in Oregon now. And last year we added quite a few more by going all the way down to Bandon. And there was a series of lakes around Bandon that we'd never visited. And in that trip, we added 5 new species. So if you feel like you want to add some more dragons to your list, sometimes you do have to travel. Sometimes you have to get to other corners of Oregon to see something new, because populations are localized, or the time of year might be different, and you'll be able to see some different animals. I really loved my time with these cardinal meadowhawks. It was such a lovely afternoon. I know I showed the all 90 species you can see in Oregon, but I wanted to talk about some of our superlatives. Hopefully you've seen these. The largest odonate in our state is the common green darner. In fact, the largest odonate in the United States is the common green darner. But we also thankfully happen to have him here. Huge, 5, maybe even 6 inch wingspan. They are hard to miss. They definitely sound like a train coming through. The smallest odonate we have in our state is the Western forktail. This one here is a female. The males are actually black, but they're super tiny. And you can find them on the Tualatin River, or areas where they have a lot more dense vegetation. The most common dragon that we have in our state is the common whitetail. I see them in my garden quite a bit. This one's a male. The female doesn't look like this. The female doesn't have the whitetail or those signature wings. She's got spotted wings, much more like an 8-spotted skimmer. So you may also have seen a female common whitetail. But just, yeah, this is the most common species we get, and it's an eye catcher too. And the most common damsel we have is the Pacific forktail. They're fun. They're all over the place. The females are a little more peachy colored, I guess. But you should be able to see those pretty regularly. So inviting odonates to your garden. Here's a couple pictures of our own pond and a waterfall that we have in our own habitat. The best way to invite odonates to your garden is to build an inviting habitat, and they love water. Even if there's some nearby or emerged a source nearby, they will fly and they will look for new sources of food and new opportunities to lay their next generation. So building a pond is an excellent way to invite them into your garden. We built our pond, and then 2 weeks later, I saw shadow darners laying eggs in it. I mean, it could not be more picture perfect than that. You would want your pond, if you're really interested in really going all in on dragons, you would want your pond to be fish free because fish will eat the nymphs and the eggs, and then there's not much they can do about that. You would want shielded filtration to make sure that your eggs and nymphs don't get sucked into that system. They love plants and perches, and the nymphs in the water need areas to hide, so like some rocks and other substrate. And letting it be. If the pond is too pristine, it will be hard for the nymphs to hide, and it might not look like such an inviting habitat to adults passing over. And I'll say too, to avoid chemicals. I think most of the folks on this attending this presentation are sympathetic to like integrated pest management strategies and trying to avoid chemicals in your garden for two reasons. One, dragonflies will also go where there's food. So if we're using a lot of products that would reduce the number of insects in our garden, then what do they have to eat? So they're less likely to stop by. And then two, dragons themselves are insects. So if you want to encourage them to come by, we wouldn't want to harm them when we do that. To date, so I live in the Bull Mountain area of Southwest Portland. Today, we have spotted 14 species of odonates in my habitat alone. Here's pictures of 8 of them in our garden. I photographed all these in our garden. And I wanted to point out so the olive clubtail down there, the bottom right, and the Pacific spiketail, upper row. The only times I have seen these 2 species in this state ever are these 2 photos in my backyard after I built my pond. And I've been out there looking. All right, I traveled the state. I am looking for species. And the only times I have seen the Pacific spiketail or the olive clubtail were here. So if you build it, they will come. And another call out about the olive clubtail too is I also post as a citizen odonatologist, I share our findings with the odonata community and on iNaturalist and other places. And when I shared this olive clubtail in our garden, to date, it is still one of the southwest most sightings of this species in the state of Oregon. It pretty much sticks to the Columbia River. So the fact that this species showed up in my garden was actually kind of exciting for the community because it also showed a little bit of the range, how they've expanded their range. But just another example of if you build it, they will come. I mentioned this to maybe iNaturalist. So if you aren't familiar with iNaturalist, it's a lovely app where citizen scientists, anyone can upload photos of what they see, and folks that are either experts or enthusiasts of those animals can weigh in and help you with an identification and track and understand the animals that are close to you. This photo here is a lance-tipped darner. I will say I think there's only 80 recorded sightings of this species in the state of Oregon, 5 of which are my husband and I. This photo right here, we took this up in Columbia County, and to date, it is the only recorded sighting of this species in Columbia County at all. So when we posted this one 5 years ago, it was like, oh my gosh. And it was just us being enthusiasts and posting what we see and sharing it with the community. And still to date, the only example of this species in that entire county. It was quite exciting because it's a vulnerable species in our state. And to see it expanding and finding new areas was really exciting. So if you wanted to explore and learn more about iNaturalist and get into it yourself, you just don't know. Being a citizen scientist, you don't know what your contributions are going to mean to those that really passionate and devote themselves to a particular area. Another app that I really like is Dragonfly ID. It's a app that was produced by the Dragonfly Societies of the Americas. And what's great about that app is you could filter just for the Portland area, and it will show you only dragons in our area And you can filter by color, by size, by, some other attribute, and it will help you narrow down quite a bit to help with your identification and understand what animal you may have seen in the field. These are some of my favorite books I wanted to share. I have a lot of books, but the Dragonflies and Damselflies of Oregon and Dragonflies and Damselflies of the West. These were my favorite books as I was getting started and learning more about the species around us, specifically. So these are the ones that I highly recommend, but there are so many great sources out there. The important thing is, I think, maybe to have a couple different sources to reference. But yeah, make note of these if you're interested in getting started. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, well, I'm sorry that you couldn't interact with any of us because you would have heard me gasping,
Okay.
laughing, and exclaiming as you were going through this. These pictures are just incredible.
Thank you.
So you and your husband are certainly doing a wonderful job and clearly adding to the knowledge of dragonflies in Oregon.
That's
So,
my goal.
so let me now go into the Q&A and see what we've got here. So how can we support or attract dragonflies if we're not near natural water? I think you answered that by saying make a pond,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, a pond certainly helps. I will admit, my dad has had dragonflies come by and lay in a bird bath. Now, we don't want that. I'll try to get out with a net and move them to a pond, but if they're flying overhead and they see water that looks inviting, they'll come for it. So yeah, you could certainly encourage them by building a pond, or even if you don't have the means to do the water, having food. They will come through and you'll see darners patrol back and forth hunting. It's if your garden is a good hunting ground,
Mm,
them come by as well.
okay. And are these dragonflies all native to Oregon?
Yes, yes,
That's
they are. What a great question. I've never had that one before.
just want to make sure that there weren't any interlopers sneaking in there.
Not these. No, no. Yeah, these ones are all native to Oregon. Yeah. What a great.
Okay. And when you visited Vernonia Lake to see the emergence, what time of year was it
Ooh, the
when wanting to do that?
spiny basket tail emergence was June of last year.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say that I didn't get too much into it, but all of the different species emerge at different times. You won't find these dragons up all year. So the first emergence of the earlier emerging species will start to happen here in April. We'll get the earliest ones, the California darner, the bluets, of course, will be out, some of the earlier species. And then there are our latest ones that you'll see flying still into October, maybe even November. Last year I saw them. Those are like the shadow darners, and some of the late ones. And then most of the species you'll find squarely in the summer.
Okay.
Some adult species will fly for only a matter of weeks, like the river jewelwing I mentioned. If you see them, they're only up for like 2 weeks. Get it while
Mm,
you can. And then you've got species like the striped meadowhawk that will be in flight for 4 or 5 months. Uh,
wow.
so yeah, different time of year is important.
Okay. And are they considered beneficial insects?
Yes, quite a bit. They are keystone species in their habitats. So if you were to take a dragonfly out of its habitat, imagine all of that food that they eat that would start to become a significant nuisance for us. They are accidental pollinators. Because they will land on plants and perch nearby, and as they do and move around looking, for places to rest,
Oh,
they
yeah.
accidentally pollinate. They do not bite, they do not sting, they are not harmful in any way, and they keep our nuisance insects in check.
Oh, well, you mentioned how many mosquitoes that
Oh
they eat.
gosh, one adult dragonfly could eat up to 200 mosquitoes a day. Sign me up.
Um, do drought and higher than normal temperatures threaten dragonflies?
Um, I don't know so much about the higher temperatures. The water being warmer, might encourage them to emerge more quickly than maybe they naturally would. Drought is certainly a problem. So is our wetlands or our vernal pools. So we do have vernal pools that might stay maybe wet for a longer period of time, enough for a dragonfly to complete its life cycle and emerge.
Yeah.
But if those dry out and other sources that they rely on, small ponds or pools dry out, yes, that can impact the the number of habitat.
Okay. Um, and this question, can you do all of the study and identification you need to with just photography, or do you sometimes need to catch them?
What an excellent question I do get. All right. I don't catch the dragons. And now there are a number of other citizen dragonfly folks that I do partner and discuss with who do catch because for some, especially the nymphs and some species, you have to catch in order to get a really close look at the cerci, the very end of the abdomen, and to really understand. But for me, I don't do it because, as I mentioned earlier, if the dragonfly cannot fly, it will starve. And I am too worried about catching a specimen and harming his wings and preventing that individual from making the next generation that it keeps me from doing it. Now, I know it's important science. I do catch nymphs, study the nymphs, and then release the nymphs back into the water. But I do not catch the adults.
Okay. Um, you made mention of that they like light colored rocks.
Mm.
Can you speak more about that or how important that is if I was trying to build a habitat?
Absolutely. I think the important thing is variety because species have different preferences. And I did mention that dragons try to thermoregulate, like self-regulate their body temperature with the sun and the environment so they can warm up when they need to or cool off when they need to. And having different shades of rocks gives them that opportunity. So a large black rock will hold a different temperature than, say, a large flat light colored rock. So giving them different options allows them. It's just more of an inviting habitat feature. They're more willing to come and
Okay.
stop by because it'll meet the needs they have in the moment.
Okay. And here somebody has, Susan has her pond cleaned, no chemicals, but partially cleared out and refilled twice a year. To not disturb the nymphs, is there a better time to clean out the pond?
That's a great question. They're hiding out in the bottom. If you've got them, they're down there. So you have to be very careful about how you clean it out. I would say if you wanted to do a water change, you would just siphon off water from the top and replenish. What we do is we hand net like large debris or clumps of algae. And my husband thoughtfully goes through them. Are there any nymphs? Puts the nymphs back in the pond because it does happen, and then takes that detritus away. So we go through and we look at the clumps of stuff, and we put those little guys back in the habitat.
Okay. Let's see. Are there certain pesticides that are particularly lethal for dragons? I think your feeling was to pretty much stay away,
I
right?
mean, so we do IPM in our garden. Like I kind of let things, I try to achieve a balance. I would say any of the chemicals that are harmful for, say, bees are going to be the same for dragons.
Okay.
So if you're looking at a particular product on the labeling on the back, and even then you would want to do additional research. The Backyard Sort of Habitat Program has a site too where we go through the safe products. You would want to research it more.
Okay. Um, and this question is, do they overwinter? I think we know the answer to that in terms of the nymphs of some species do overwinter, but do any adults
They
overwinter?
don't. They don't. When they emerge, they are something beautiful and spectacular to look at for the few months that they're there, and then they make the next generation and they are gone. There are no adult dragonflies around us in December, January, February. They've all moved on. The
Okay.
next generation is in the water waiting.
Okay. And in terms of IPM, what pests are dragonflies most useful in helping control?
Oh, mosquitoes.
Sounds like mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, and then I'm trying to think what I've seen them snatch. I haven't seen any snatch bees or wasps, but I have seen them snatch moths. Um,
Mhm.
but mostly they go after tiny prey that's easy to catch on the wing, and like the darners, the ones that patrol back and forth that are really difficult to photograph, um, they eat on the wing. Whereas you'll find some of the skimmers, the flame skimmers or the whitetail, like they will grab some prey and then go sit and eat it somewhere where they're stationary, and then it makes it a lot easier to photograph. Darners will eat on the wing. They just patrol and eat, patrol and eat. And so the way for them to do that, though, is the prey is small.
Gotcha.
They're grabbing
Gotcha.
like tiny midges and flies, and they're eating and they're tucking their legs back in. Fly, grab, eat. So, yeah.
Um, in the pictures of them laying eggs, did the eggs just drop into the water or are they laid into something in the water?
That depends on species, actually. Some just drop them in the water. Some will lay their eggs on a leaf above water and then they will drop down. Some lay that will actually puncture and lay the eggs inside of bark that is adjacent to water where the water will rise. And then the eggs, is a way to protect the eggs until they're ready to hatch
Yeah.
and they drop off in the water. So that's an excellent question. And it is all of it. Some directly in the water, some in leaf matter, some in bark, some above. Yeah, it varies.
Okay. And so a question, the water source, can it be tap water that you just poured come out from your hose?
I think that's fine so long as there are also we have a pond filter mechanism that we put on the end of our hose that removes a lot of those minerals and things that
Oh,
come from our city water. If you go to a pond store or learn more about that, and I see my husband, I think, is on the chat. He's been providing some counter to
oh,
my
okay.
responses. So he'll maybe weigh in a little bit more, but we do have this device that we screw our hose into in the garden, and then from that we fill our pond or top off our pond, and it removes a lot of the minerals and chemicals that come from our city water so that it doesn't go into the pond.
Very interesting. And I noticed this is a question for me. I've noticed on many of the pictures, most of them, that the dragons and the damsels have dark spots on the edges of their wings. Does that mean anything, or is that?
No, the dragons themselves have, and I wonder if I can find find one. So those dark spots at the edges of the wings are actually the nodes. So many times they are colored. Sometimes it might be black bordered and a different color underneath it. And the reason for that is that there's some theories that they're actually a firmer structure in the wing. So it helps build a lot of extra structure, especially on
Oh,
that part of where they're in flight. So they're actually their pterostigma is what they're called. The nodes are actually further down in the wings. Those are called pterostigma. So the theory is it could help with thermoregulation, but another is that cell on the wings is much more rigid and it helps with stability and some of the motion that they need to do in flight. It gives them sort of that bearing to the much more delicate wing around it.
interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, there's one final question, although I don't know that this is really applicable. Somebody asked about how you can protect your lens when you're taking pictures underwater, but your
Oh,
pictures are all above water, except
all of
when you fell out of your
except when
kayak.
I fell out of my kayak. Um, all of our photos are taken outside of the water. I would love to explore husbands on this call, get an aquatic setup so that we could photograph nymphs better under the surface. But no, everything we take is above. Now, that is a very valid concern, though. If you are approaching the water a lot, you have some very expensive equipment to be cautious and to have the right sort of the right system in place so that you don't compromise your equipment when you're approaching these animals.
And for everybody if you want to check what's going on in the chat, her husband Ron has added some information there. And so there's some more information as well as information just about how you can, if you want to watch this webinar again, how you can find it. and stuff. So, Erin, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I know I kind of blew through the beginning really fast. I love these animals, and I hope that this inspired everybody who watched this video tonight to go out into the field this summer, and hopefully you've learned something that'll excite you when you see them. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.